You mentioned vending machines. Are you suggesting that you can access drugs, like illegal drugs, through safe supply, which then I guess is legal through that measure, through a vending machine?
That's one of the ways of accessing these drugs that Canadian taxpayers are funding is something that from an addiction treatment perspective seems really backwards. Many people will be familiar with the understanding that addiction involves an absence of human relationships, an absence of healthy connections in our lives. It's only looks like a glaring step backwards to actually remove a potential point of human interaction with a machine for people who are destitute and who are surviving through addiction and other ways of coping. But yes, that's one of the things that we're doing here in BC.
And I
And
want to talk about what is concerning about safe supply, because in my mind, and maybe I'm too black and white on this issue, but if someone has an addiction to drugs, that's not a good thing. And so we would want to stop that. So how does providing someone drugs or more access to drugs help them break an addiction?
well, the fact is that by all measures so far, it doesn't. And what it's more likely to do is provide people with essentially a source of funding. It's a fungible asset. And so there have been quite a few reports recently of people simply selling what's referred to as diversion. But they're taking the drugs that are provided to them, which have monetary value,
Right.
selling them partly because they're not the drugs that they want. And so using them in that way, it would be more compassionate and safer if we simply gave them cash.
So I, as a taxpayer, have now become the drug dealer. Is that safe to say?
That's the idea. Yeah,
Oh,
that's the idea. And new companies have formed and are forming that are moving into this space that are essentially looking for taxpayer-generated revenue streams and that have as a business model trying to displace current gang and other cartel sources of drugs, illicit drugs. This is really the brave new world that we're all being drawn into.
it's such a mess. And of course, we can't trivialize this, because at the end of the result, this is human life we're talking. Rather, we've touched upon what we think doesn't work. Well, what models do work? Like, I know in Alberta, they have something called forced treatment. Would that be a good alternative to safe supply?
I wouldn't say alternative. I think what we've already shown is that if we provide people with voluntary access to pathways to better wellness, they'll take them in large measures. I'm talking about people living on our streets, living in encampments, people discharged from hospitals or released from custody with no place to go. If we give people voluntary access to supports, particular supports, they will take them, and the results are transformative. And this is from randomized controlled trials. This is not some sort of I'm not developing some thought experiment here. These are known outcomes. So my advice would be to exhaust our capacity to engage people in effective forms of helping voluntarily, and then see who's left. There will be people who push back. There will be people who are stubborn, who are committed to making their living illegally and trafficking and in other things. There are all sorts of bad actors, but I think we should avoid starting with the assumption that that's somehow characterizing the population. If we proceed with voluntary and then move to what's left, that's really the approach that Alberta is taking. They get a lot of attention for the inclusion of involuntary, but that's meant to be the last resort, not where we start.
We have about 25 seconds left. Do you see the BC government, taking these steps? Can this actually end? 20 seconds.
I think the current government in BC is so stuck in that they can't change. Part of their problem is they have only a little over a year until the next election, and the challenge to any government of taking steps is going to be really unpopular with many constituencies that have grown comfortable around the status quo. So I don't think that the current government will, but I believe the public and the public across our country is showing a lot more interest and interest in solutions. And the next governments that they elect are more likely to pick up the challenge.